Today, we talk about how the theology of the body is changing the face of the pro-life movement with Right to Life of Louisville Executive Director Margaret Schay on Spirit Inspire starting right now.
Broadcasting from the Cathedral of the Assumption in Louisville, Kentucky, this is Spirit Inspire. And now, here is your host.
Welcome back to another episode of Spirit Inspire. I am your host for today, Vincent Ricketts, and joined with me, as always, is my co-host, John.
Hello, Vincent. Good to be with you.
Hi, John. Always. And our special guest today in the studio with us is Margaret Schay. She is Executive Director over at Right to Life of Louisville. Margaret?
Thank you for having me. What a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, thanks for coming on.
Yeah.
This is great. So we always begin just kind of by asking you, the guest, kind of, what's your story?
All right. Well, I am the eighth out of 10 kids, and my dad devoted the majority of his career to being a constitutional lawyer for the pro-life movement. So he was very, very involved in a lot of cases in support of the pro-life movement in the 80s and the 90s and 2000s even. And my mom was his number one fan, always there beside him, supporting him.
So you were just naturally steeped in it.
I was, yes. And I say beside him, but really she was, of course, very busy with us kids, taking care of us. And so my dad was obviously out there doing a lot of work and cases. And it was just the air I breathed. I never really thought of myself as, I always thought of myself as pro-life, but I never thought of that as like an addition. It was just kind of part of who I was growing up. And I carried that love. I appreciated that formation that I received from my parents. My parents loved having a big family. They really enjoyed welcoming others into their home. And I just remember as a daughter noticing how much my mom really did enjoy being a mom. And so that really was very influential to me. And so I grew up and went to college and, met my future husband there, and we got married and settled down and started having our own kids. We got married 15 years ago here in Louisville, actually. And but we lived in Atlanta, so we came back for the wedding since I'm from here. And so so we had three kids right away, 2011, 2012. The first two are 15 months apart. And then our son, George, the end of 2014. And I remember when I was pregnant with George thinking like, oh boy, like here we go, like this, we're going to have a lot of kids. And, a little nervous and also very excited, very much wanted to have that big family that I grew up with. And our story really took a change in 2017. We had our first miscarriage. We lost our daughter, Mary Agnes. I was about 12 weeks along. It was a shock, a surprise. All my other pregnancies had been healthy. But I was told by the doctors that this was very common, 1 in 4 miscarry, and, they couldn't find anything wrong. And this, that happens. And so then we got pregnant with our son, Benedict Peter, little Ben. And he passed away at about 17, maybe it was 15. He was 15 weeks along. And that was a horrible shock. We were not expecting it. All the ultrasounds, everything had been fine. And I went in for an ultrasound and he had passed away. He was old enough for us for me to give birth to him and to hold him. We have his footprints and handprints and pictures of him. And so that was a devastating experience. It was tremendous shock, 2 in a row. And then 2 years later, in the midst of COVID, I got pregnant with our daughter, Joan Margaret, whom we named Joni. We nicknamed Joni. And another beautiful blessing, tested everything. Everything looks great. Everything's good. My husband wasn't allowed to a single ultrasound with me. And I went in for everything checked out great. And I went in for my 18-week scan. They had bumped up my 20 to be an 18-week because of my history. And I was at a high-risk OB here in Louisville. And I will never forget that experience. So I'm there alone. It's COVID. My husband wasn't even allowed in the building. At the time, our other kids were still too young to be home, by themselves. So he stayed home with them. And I went into this high-risk appointment and they didn't even have to tell me. I knew. I already knew the signs. I could read the tech's face. I knew. I said, oh my gosh, he's dead. I just blurted that out. And the tech ran out of the room, got the doctor who came in, and I was crying a lot. He offered me, a bottle of water, and I just kept crying. And initially, he kind of comforted me. And then after I didn't stop crying right away, this high-risk OB said to me, well, this baby probably had something wrong with him anyway, so it's probably better that he or she died.
Gosh.
And I was just overcome with grief. I couldn't even think straight. I was in a complete and total shock by myself, third in a row, each time further along. And, later I reflected a lot on that experience, and not just his lackluster bedside manner, but just the message that we give to women and the message we tell them about not only their baby, but also their body. So if a baby is not someone we recognize, if a preborn baby isn't someone we can recognize and mourn for, at a high-risk OB's office, no less. I mean, come on. Like, he's got to have patients like that multiple times a day.
Yeah.
And I thought, if you don't understand the value of the child, you don't understand the value of the loss that's here, the significance of the loss. Mm-hmm. And you also don't understand the gift that made this even possible. You don't understand my fertility. Yeah. You don't understand women. You don't get us. You really don't care. You see our fertility as a problem to fix. And when a baby has a problem, get rid of the baby, right? When a woman's body when a woman is, going to be fertile and doesn't want to be fertile, take a pill, get rid of it, right? Like, the body is a problem to fix, whether it's in the woman or the baby or the father, right? And so it's a natural consequence that we get to that point. So that just made this huge impact on me. I just felt like, wow, I've always been pro-life. I always knew abortion was bad for women and for babies and for fathers and for all of society. But oh my goodness, it's impacting every cell of our care, of our society. And now these doctors who are trained to be high-risk OBs, labor and delivery. I mean,
You'd think they have a little bit more compassion.
Right. Yeah. I thought it's completely erased compassion, right? And the New York Times had an article on this recently, that we have less compassion for women in crisis pregnancies. And I wasn't in a crisis pregnancy, but we have less compassion for them because society thinks, oh, you could have taken care of it and you didn't. So that had just a huge impact on me and how I looked at this issue. Fast forward to last summer. Unfortunately, my husband and I lost another child. We had a little girl, Joy, whom we named Joy, from the verse, I'm blanking on the verse now, you will have, no one will take your joy from you. There will be no more sorrow. And we meditated a lot on that verse for those few weeks that we had her. So our little daughter, Joy, passed away at around 8 weeks last summer. So it's been a really interesting journey for me, because what I have noticed in this work is that the abortion movement doesn't fear babies. Their goal is not to get rid of babies. Their goal is to equalize the playing field between men and women, to actually get rid of women, to get rid of gender differences. That's the goal. That's why they're so in love with IVF. I mean, look at all the pro-IVF stuff out there, right? They need more for their movement, right? So the problem isn't the baby for them. The problem is the woman's fertility. And they understand that if we can get rid of that, if we can teach women to see that as a problem, see that as something to manipulate, see that as something to control, see that as something to fear, then we can really direct how this plays out. And that's what we see.
Well, and it's not just the woman's fertility, but I would even go further and say the problem is the woman, because it's that which makes woman woman.
Right.
Right.
Well, exactly. Yeah. Male and female, he made them.
Yeah.
He saw all that he had made and he saw that it was good.
So if you eliminate what makes women special, like what makes women women, right?
Mhm.
And same thing with men, but in
Absolutely.
this particular case,
Yeah.
you eliminate that, like you eliminate woman,
Yes. Yes.
right?
Yeah. I mean, our fertility, our identity as a son or a daughter of God is what makes us who we are, right? My identity is not wife. It is not mother. It is a beloved daughter of God. Those are roles. Those are my roles that I have here on this earth. But we know that in heaven, and we know that in the beginning when he created us, he saw us as male and female, and then he calls us his beloved son or daughter.
Yeah, this
So
is where our
that's our
earthly
identity.
mother could become our sister in heaven. Our
Mhm.
earthly father is our brother in heaven, ultimately, in the grand scheme of things.
Yes. Yeah.
Even though in heaven we'll still remember them as our earthly
Right.
mother or father,
Yeah.
but there will be a difference,
Yeah.
There's something mystical about that, but
Yeah.
our
God
culture
has
doesn't
no
see that.
grandchildren. No
Right?
grandchildren.
That's so
Just
powerful.
children.
As you're talking, Margaret, I just can't help but reflect on the profundity of your suffering journey that has prepared you to take on such an important and critical role as the executive director of Right to Life of Louisville, an organization that has been soul-searching for several years now as we prepared for the dream that we had for decades, the fall of Roe versus Wade. Like,
Yeah.
who would have ever thought, like, so soon? But yet God orchestrated things so perfectly that the right president at the right time to appoint the right Supreme Court justices to make the right decision at the moment that only God could have made happen. And now we're like, wait, what? What do we do now? And so, like, for 50 years, the pro-life movement got into these habits of what we have to do, what we have to address, how we have to argue, what kind of people we need to be, and who we need to reach. And yet your journey, it's like God was preparing you to lead the pro-life movement in a not a different direction, but more like a deeper direction because of your own suffering. Like, how do you connect your own suffering journey of the 4 miscarriages, Margaret? I'm so sorry.
Thank you.
I'm so sorry for that. How do you redeem that? How do you give people an insight into your heart so that they can see this deeper reality of what we have to address for others who are hurting in this culture?
I think that what my losses, our losses have taught me, and I reflect on this a lot because it's faith is not, it's not a linear journey, right? There's ups and downs, and I wouldn't wish this on anybody. It's been very painful. It's been very difficult, and an immense loss for our entire family. Especially this last one with our children old enough to know what was going on and the sorrow they expressed being older this time around than they were the 4 years before at the last one. So I think that what's interesting to me is the journey. So when I mentioned when I was pregnant with our son George, who was born in December of 2014, I thought, oh, we'll have a lot. And there was, there was excitement there. And there was also a little fear of like, oh boy, like this is happening really quick. And of course we know what it means to be open, and we're so grateful for that and everything. But I think, a little bit from the culture had crept in of a little bit of fear of fertility. I don't think I could have articulated that at the time. And my husband and I have always been on the same page about, living with openness to life. And so there wasn't anything, dramatic or anything like that that we were going to do. But I look back and I then see, the loss of our daughter, Mary, little Mary, and the shock that caused, and then Ben, the trauma that ended up being a emergency middle of the night. I hemorrhaged. It was terrible. It was a very horrible experience. And as each time that I got pregnant again, I would have this fear of like, oh no, is this baby going to live? Is this baby going to live? And I remember that very keenly with Joni in 2020. I remember talking to my sister and saying, I just have this feeling this baby isn't going to live. I don't know why. We've tested everything. I don't know why. I just think this baby isn't going to make it. And I just thought, okay, well, this is just because of this history I have. Well, I guess what I'm trying to say is that I look at this progression from a little bit from fear of fertility that I experienced myself to then fear of loss, and then burying 4 babies is a lot to bury. And then after somewhere in between Joni and Joy, in those years of healing that we gave to the Lord to just heal and recoup and accept the losses we had, that fear transformed into a profound appreciation for my fertility, a profound appreciation for the gift of life. I was always very grateful. Don't get me wrong. I had always said, like, I would do it again, like knowing that all 4 of them would die, I would do it again in a heartbeat. But that fear shifted. And now I look at my body and my fertility and continue to work on this, right, with my Creighton doctors and all of that. And instead of looking at it with fear, even fear that a baby will die, perhaps again, I look at it and I go, wow, this is amazing. This body is amazing. It's amazing. Through the help of my husband, right, we can make a baby. But then after we've done that, my body takes us on. How cool, for 9 whole months. God willing, if this baby lives, like, I get to birth a baby, and then for an entire year, if everything works out, right, and there's always things can deviate and not go right, I can sustain a human life with the most perfect breast milk on the planet for that child for a whole 12 months. So 12 months plus 9 months, for 21 months, my body alone can gestate, grow, nurture, birth, and feed a baby until he or she is 1. I am in awe. I am in awe. I mean, that is just amazing. That is amazing to me that I can do that. I don't think there is anything more empowering. I don't think there is anything more beautiful. I don't think there is anything more courageous that a woman can do than to do that. And I think that when we look at what a woman can do with her body, with her fertility, and I know that we all, myself obviously included, have struggles with this, right? It doesn't always go according to plan. But when we look at how it can go, the natural order of it, it is just amazing. It is amazing. And it gives me not only a deeper appreciation for my body, but also for my husband and for men, of course, in general. I think of, the woman has this ability to nurture, to sustain, and to nourish. And the man, he has this amazing power to generate. And how cool is that, to generate? And what do we say in Spider-Man? With great power comes
Great
responsibility. So the man has this huge role, and he has to be very discerning with that, right? That's a huge. I mean, I was talking with my son. I'm always chatting about this stuff. So I was talking with my 10-year-old, and we were talking about my training recently I went to, where I was learning about teaching cycle awareness to young girls. And so we were talking about young boys, and I said, hey, my son's 10, our youngest. And I said, do you know for how long a man can make a baby? And he goes, no, how? And I said, until the day he dies. Like, he can generate until the day he dies. Now, a woman, when does that end? And he's like, well, I think it's somewhere in your 40s usually. And I was like, yeah, generally, by 50, it's usually gone, right? So it's like this amazing power that he has that goes on. And yet hers is this shorter period. Anyway, I guess all of that, I'm in awe. I'm in awe of the ability to bring life into the world. And I pray that I will have that opportunity again. But I now look at my body very differently, with a much more profound respect and reverence and appreciation than I did before.
I think that's what I feel toward my wife. I mean, we're new parents, and we have a 7 or 8 month old, and as she gets older, and I see what my wife does, and I am also in awe, and a new level of respect, and that's also brought a deeper level of healing for us in our marriage and our own relationship together, that we're still trying to understand, and deepen ourselves. But it's like what she does for our little Lily is amazing. And I'm like, well, I can't do anything. I feel like I did my job, and that's all you can do, right? But like the culture, just being what it is, people just have forgotten that, and I just thank you for your courageous witness.
Thank you. Thank you.
So, you have books, there's a lot on here that, you are getting into. As executive director of Right to Life of Louisville, I know that, the pro-life movement was going in one direction for a long time. Like, what is this deeper direction? Like, you mentioned a show that you're talking about.
Yes.
Like, what is all of this going on?
Yeah. So, in the past decades, and I grew up with this, I joked with somebody recently. I said I was probably on more board meetings as a 10-year-old than anybody else once my dad got the car phone installed. So I had an ear into this movement, I feel like, in many ways. Not that I necessarily remember any of those particularly, but this topic and the work of this movement and what was going on and the direction. And as you mentioned, we were so focused on ending Roe, which of course was vital, right? Because our hands were tied. So there was a lot we just couldn't do. And the movement has been so courageous. I just want to give a huge shout out to everybody, all the Right to Life organizations, and especially the resource centers, because even with our hands tied, even with the laws so unjustly against us, we have still done so much work in the nearly 50 years, the 49 years that Roe existed. But we do see a huge opportunity for a pivot today. Roe is gone, praise God. And so the question is, okay, well, what do we do now, right? Now, we've seen a lot of ballot measures across the country. Most of them have been unsuccessful. There has been, abortion is very prominent right now, top of the table for discussion.
That's the evidence of change the law, but you haven't changed the heart.
Absolutely. Yes. Yeah. I mean, we've seen what a role that played in last year's presidential election. And so we saw great success in Florida this fall. They were able to oppose Amendment 4, which would have enshrined abortion into their constitution. And what I love about what abortion did was they really rallied medical professionals. And they got together through the APLOG Association, the American Association of Pro-Life Obstetricians and Gynecologists, different from ACOG, right? So ACOG has unfortunately devolved into abortion advocacy, and so which is the American College of Obstetricians, and so APLOG formed as a special interest group under ACOG several decades ago, and anyway, now they're on their own, and they rallied 700 doctors in Florida and did speaking circuits. And of course, it helped that their governor was pro-life, right? Life affirming. So that made a big difference, right? But they were really able to get the message out, and they broadened the conversation. And I think that's what we have to do. We really believed the other side when they said, it's not a baby. Now, they obviously always knew it was a baby, right? But what we've seen today is, by 2025, we are keenly aware. Everybody knows this is a baby. Our ultrasounds are so much clearer. Everything is so, digital. I mean, you can film your own ultrasound, right? I have footage of our daughter Joni's ultrasound. I was allowed to record it since my husband couldn't be there, Wow. So, we all have little, cameras in our pockets, right? So, so just the ability for us to monitor, to be aware, to know, to track, to feel, to sense, all of that is out there. And the other side is like, wait a second. Ooh, this argument doesn't work anymore. They still say it, right? They still say it's not a baby, right? It's not a human, all those arguments. But really, they have now made the argument that abortion is just something women need. Women need abortion. That's ultimately, whatever you read about abortion, from pro-abortion advocates. That is their argument. Women need abortion. This is a women's right. This is healthcare. It's a need. Women need abortion. Just this morning, I read an article about a Christian couple in Boise, Idaho, who had to, quote, flee to Salt Lake City, Utah for her to procure an abortion for their 20-week-old son, Tucker, in February of 2024. And they had photos of them with him afterward. They had a special burial for him, all the kinds of things. They had a special image created of their family with Jesus there holding little Tucker. And this terrible article about the medical need for abortion. Let me tell you, do you know that at 20 weeks, do you know how long an abortion takes at 20 weeks? Days. To do an abortion at 20 weeks safely without causing hemorrhage, without putting the mother's health in severe risk, it takes a minimum, at least a day. It's a process, right? What is always faster is a C-section. A C-section, you can have that baby out in 20 minutes. So this whole medical need, the stories they tell, she had to flee. They literally use the word flee in the article. She had to flee to Salt Lake City. She didn't have to flee to Salt Lake City. You could have done a cesarean section. There was a complication, and she had contracted some virus, and the baby was affected by this, and the mother was potentially going to be very soon. There's nothing in our laws or in our church that states that you cannot remove a baby in a medical emergency, not kill the baby, but remove the baby with a C-section. And with our neonatal care being so amazing, we have seen babies live as young as 21 weeks. So it is amazing the things we have done. I don't know if you all saw, I think it was a year ago, Leah Darrow, the Catholic influencer. Yeah. She had a baby, Sly. He was born with Down syndrome at 21 weeks, all kinds of complications. He had sepsis, she had sepsis. They both should have died, right? So we can always remove a baby and try to sustain that life, do what we can for his needs and the mother's. That's not a problem. But they are taking these stories and lying and saying, okay, well, now these laws are this problem because these women, they need this. There is no medical need for an abortion. There might be a medical need to remove the baby with a C-section immediately. That's very possible. That definitely can happen. A uterine rupture, all kinds of things, right? Baby needs to come out immediately for baby's sake and mom's sake. Yes, that can happen, but there's no need. And so what we saw with success in Florida, where they were able to oppose Amendment 4, was they brought in that conversation. And so they actually had the medical professionals there, because as much as our grassroots work is needed and vital, you've got to have the medical professionals out there to argue to the medical professionals on the other side, right? And so they were able to help the state see, the Floridians see, that abortion is actually bad medical care. So this argument wasn't about we're killing a baby. It was, this is bad medical care. This is going to, cause doctors not to see both patients, right? An obstetrician, an OBGYN, this is so fun. They're the only doctor who cares for two patients at once. In what other situation does any doctor treat two patients at once at every visit?
There
No.
isn't. Yeah.
No, you don't go, my son and I don't go to the podiatrist together.
Right.
He has an appointment, I get an appointment.
Right.
Right? So there is no other medical profession in which you have two patients for every appointment, where the necessity is always the two patients during pregnancy. Obviously, after pregnancy, baby goes to pediatrician, right? But during pregnancy is always two patients. And so APLOG has been very vocal about that we treat two patients. And if we're going to advocate for abortion as healthcare, if we're going to tell women this is good for them, we're actually creating a really big problem in the medical world because we're no longer seeing two patients. We're now seeing one patient and a problem, and a baby is not a problem. And this goes back to the point of that a mother's body, a woman's body, is amazing and can generate life in this amazing way. Pregnancy is a vital sign. Fertility is a vital sign. Ovulation is a vital sign. This is the fifth vital sign.
Yeah.
And so we have to make that shift. So I think, to answer your question, what do? We broaden the conversation. We don't just make the baby argument because honestly, they don't care. And if the baby argument worked, well, then after Roe with Dobbs coming out, we wouldn't have any work, right? I'd be out of a job right now, right? So obviously the baby argument doesn't work because now they're saying, look, women just need this, right? And it's passing. It's passing in a lot of states. It's getting enshrined. It's enshrined in many states. Abortion access is. And so we have to really emphasize how damaging this is for the mother, for her healthcare, for women's healthcare, that this is not women's healthcare, because what they found in Florida was that people who would not self-identify as pro-life would come out and say, actually, you know what? I don't think of myself as pro-life, but I do think that women's healthcare really matters. And now that I understand how this affects women's healthcare, I don't want this enshrined. I don't want this to be a law. And that was the way they got them. And conversely, the other side, people who identified as pro-life. So for example, that couple in Idaho that I mentioned, the article I read, they self-identified as pro-life previously. Now they said they wouldn't because of their experience. But what the other side did very successfully in turning it into this women's health thing is people started saying, well, I don't want my daughter to die. I don't want her to die because she has sepsis, right? Or die because she can't get an abortion, right? But they never told them you never need an abortion. Like medically, there's no medical reason for an abortion. So, it's been very interesting to see how the other side has done their work so successfully, and how we also need to address that. Like we have to message where they are. So if they're messaging women need abortion and we're saying it's a baby,
Yep.
We're not meeting them where they are. If we say, no, women need to be valued for who they are.
Yeah.
That's what they need. That's what they need. And they need to be supported in choosing life. Now, they can choose adoption or they can choose to raise that child, but they need to be supported in choosing life for their unborn and valued for who they are, seen as a good thing, not seen as something to fix. Their fertility is not a problem.
Yeah, what you're addressing is the lies that are being directly told and sown into the hearts and minds of people. Like the lies in the 1970s that got Roe versus Wade passed was that baby is not a person, it's a flab of tissue, it's a clump of cells, whatever that was. And we addressed that for years, and now Roe versus Wade is overturned. But the deeper lie that was also sown in at that time, but that is now more prominent and obvious today, is because this is the only lie they have left, is that woman's fertility is the problem. Woman itself is the problem. So we have to eliminate the sexual difference, which is where some of the gender confusion is coming from. But, you said that word flee, and I thought of, we recently had someone on and we discussed a lot about refugees and the need for that crisis. And, and it used to be that, a lot of organizations served women in orphanages or, with a lot of children. And in the 1970s, that need shifted. People didn't need that as much. And I immediately, without bringing it up, I immediately felt, well, probably because Roe versus Wade was passed and, abortion became more accessible and the culture shifted in that direction. But now there's this mentality of fleeing.
Yeah.
In the same kind of idea, but yet for nefarious purposes, right? And that's kind of scary because we should welcome the stranger, of course, just as Christ did. But that also includes the person that you didn't expect to, you should have expected it, but that God gave you within your own body to nurture and to nourish and to sustain, right? The child should be the one who you welcome, right? And not to flee for your life with a different mentality, like you have to remove a problem. It's such an interesting mindset that is. Fleeing from what? What are you running away from?
Yeah, it's interesting because it immediately brings to mind a conversation I had with Dr. Christina Francis, the CEO of Applog. And she was saying, we were talking about the benefits of pregnancy on the woman. We hear all these scare tactics about how bad pregnancy is for you, and it's so bad for you, and it's going to hurt you in this way, it's going to hurt you in that way. And listen, I will be the first to say, I have not had easy pregnancies it has not been easy. I've had severe gastrointestinal issues with our daughter, Joni. I was literally on an IV for a few weeks for fluids. I had home health coming. I was on a 24/7 Zofran pump. They make those. I didn't know that. So 24/7, took it off to shower, slept with it on, wore it like a purse, 24 hours a day, 24 hours and 23 hours and a half. Pumping Zofran into me, needles, with our daughter Joy last summer, all kinds of blood clotting medicine, progesterone shots. So I want to say I'm very sensitive and aware to the fact that it can be very hard, and the mother can have, there can be a lot of complications. There can be a lot of pain, of course, involved in that. However, we do have to acknowledge this amazing power, again, that a baby actually generates stem cells for his mom that help her in her particular needs during that pregnancy and after. So all 7 of my pregnancies have given me customized stem cells, even the ones that didn't come to term. I have received special stem cells from them to help my body heal in ways I don't even know it needed.
Even through the complications and pregnancy.
Even through the complications, even in the midst of complications. Yes. It's amazing. Yeah. It's amazing.
See, that's not what an unstable government does that refugees are fleeing from. Equating an unstable government with pregnancy is what is basically happening there.
This is the natural order, and I think this is the challenge. And
pregnancy is not a dictatorship.
Yeah. Pregnancy, it's natural. It's a natural. It's the way we're all brought here, right? We are all grown in our mother's womb, right? Yeah. And so there's a good there, right? We don't look at trees and say, oh, you have brown leaves, get rid of those. You're gonna get brown leaves in the fall. Just cut off all your branches in the spring while you're young. Cut them all off, right? Do we destroy our trees in the springtime so that they don't get brown, so they don't go through the different changes, right? So no, but we look at the woman's body and we go, how do I change that? How do I trim that? How do I cut that? How do I, tie that? Whatever.
Preserve the youth without the life.
Yes, yeah, it's very problematic, and just not understanding. I think that broader conversation that no, this is a good thing. Pregnancy is a good thing. Are all the circumstances always great? No, they're not. They really aren't. There are going to be all kinds of different complications, all kinds of different messiness, right? Because we're human and we're fallen and we live in this world. But a pregnancy is a good thing, and it is a vital sign.
Yeah.
You've not yet brought it up, but I'd like to hear your thoughts on the obvious connection that we've been kind of dancing around here between contraception and all of these cultural problems that we're talking about.
So true.
Right? Contraception not just being a thing that someone does, let's say, but being an entire worldview that informs how we see ourselves and our bodies and one another. What are those connections that you see?
This so funny. That was always my dad's line. He would always say, oh, until they really realize the connection between contraception and abortion, we'll never really have the cultural shift. And this reminds me of a conversation I had in the fall with Angela Minter from Sisters for Life.
And we had her on a couple years ago.
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah, that's so awesome. She's phenomenal. Mm-hmm. And so one of the things she said to me was, the majority of abortions are as a contraception, right? And of course I'd heard that statistic, but she, obviously in her work, she's really seeing that, and she's, shared in her own story that was very much her approach as well with her story. And so I thought, oh, that's so interesting, the connection there, that we're really now, and this was always the goal, right? You know, in the 90s, they used to say safe, legal, and rare. Of course,
Yep.
we know they didn't mean that, right? But the ultimate goal was really to make this the method of birth control, because it was the most efficient, right? Because we all know that the pill can fail. We all know that things can go wrong.
Well, those are all
right?
preventative. This
Yeah.
is attacking the actual result.
Right. Yeah.
Directly.
Right. So if we have this undesired result and we have this very efficient method to get rid of it, then this is ultimately the most efficient way, right? So I guess my point here is that we see abortion really now, the culture does, as a contraceptive, especially for college girls. It's huge for college girls. Partying, not thinking about it. Okay, just go get the abortion. We're done. That's no problem. It's super easy. In and out, right? There's no regulation. I mean, there's no rules that require you to stay overnight. Medically, you really should. You should be monitored
Or
after
the
a procedure
Plan B
like
pill
that.
as
Yeah,
well.
the abortion through the mail, right? So I guess the answer to that really is that we have based this whole thing, this whole movement, the abortion industry and the contraception industry, it hinges on the sexual revolution. It hinges on the premise that happiness is being able to do what I want, when I want, with whom I want, however I want, as long as it's consensual in most cases, not always actually. They're not even necessarily always advocating for that, right? So, and if I can do that, if I want to be able to do whatever I want, whenever I want, well, I need to not have the consequences, right? Because then I really can't do whatever I want when I want, right?
Mm-hmm.
We don't say this with drunk driving, right? I should be able to drink however much I want and drive however much I want. Well, no, because there's consequences, right?
Yeah.
So they look at like sex and they go, okay, well, if we want to be able to have sex with whomever we want, whenever we want, however we want, with whatever we want, with whatever age, with whatever species, whatever, then we need to have no barrier to the effect of that, right? Specifically for a baby, right? We cannot have a baby. And, you know, we don't want to have other bad side effects like diseases and things like that. But like the baby is the worst thing we could get out of this, because that is going to hinder my ability to do whatever I want. And so it all hinges on that sexual revolution premise that freedom comes from doing whatever I want. So what is the answer to this? I think that the answer to this really is to help young girls and young boys have a felt sense of safety in their body, a sense that their body is a good thing, that their body can be trusted, that their body has a natural order and rhythm that we are to honor. And of course, we understand this in the church, and this is, of course, everything that theology of the body teaches, right? Theology of the body's foundational point is that life is a gift. Everything builds on top of that. When I taught theology of the body in a school for a period of time, one thing that was sad to see was that there were some kids who, when we would walk through the exercises of like, okay, is life good? Okay, life is good. Okay, well, what if this happens? Is life still good? Okay, well, what if this? What if, what if this accident happens? What if you're injured in this way? What if this? What if a person has nothing, or they're, living on the streets, right? And it was interesting to see in the course of this conversation how many kids would, lower their hands. Well, no, life's no longer good. Life's no longer good, and then we get down to like, you've got nothing. Is it good? And so we want to teach girls and boys to honor and to value their bodies. We want to teach them, obviously, to wait until they're married to engage in sexual intimacy, right? For obvious reasons. But the beginning of all of that is not actually the theological part. It's not actually the abstinence part. It's not actually the dating and relationship advice part. It's actually the human formation piece, the natural order. In his famous encyclical, Pope Paul VI and Humanae Vitae, where he prophesied all the things we see today in the culture, right? He said, we will be using women. We will see this as a problem. It will increase all these different societal issues. And so we've seen that happen. And he made a reference to Aristotle and to natural order. And how his point was that there is a natural order that, independent of what we know from our faith, there's a natural order that we want to honor here. And so I think that's the very first thing we actually have to bring back to the kids, is we have to teach them that there's this natural order, and that's written in our bodies, that when my body goes through this monthly cycle, that's not something icky or gross or something to take a pill to get rid of, right? When my body does this whole dance and process, when it prepares for a baby, right? So every single menstruation that every girl goes through, from, let's say she starts at 12, right? Her body doesn't know that she's not going to have a baby, but her body prepares. Yeah, I just think it's so important that we teach young girls and boys to trust their bodies, not to fear them. There's a hierarchy of needs, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, a little pyramid. And so at the base is food and water. And then at the next level is safety. And then at the third level is belonging. And so what he's saying is that we have this need, every single person, and our church affirms this in our own teachings in psychology, et cetera. We have, of course, a need for food and water, right? If I don't have food and water, I'm going to die. But after food and water, I actually need a felt sense of safety. I need to know that I am safe. So let me give you an example. How many times have we seen either a guy or a girl who's gotten into a relationship that's been really unhealthy? And we're looking at it and we're going, oh my goodness, this is a train wreck. You need to get out. Like, he doesn't value you, or she doesn't value you. He's using you, she's using you, whatever the situation, right? And so we've all seen this, right? Or maybe even experienced it, right? And so what is that? Why does that happen? That's because he or she, we'll just say she, for example, the girl in the abusive relationship, she has put belonging before safety in the hierarchy. She is desiring to fit in, to feel accepted, to have intimacy, even though it's not safe for her. And this is completely opposed to our anthropological design. God has desired us, and this is, our teachings reflect this everywhere, right? Why do we have fasting rules about 65 and younger age? Why are we absolved from fasting when we're sick, right? I mean, the church acknowledges this, that we have to take care of the natural order, because grace builds on nature, as Aquinas reminds us. Grace builds on nature. We can have all the prayers, you can say all the rosaries, you can teach all the theology of the body that you want, but if those young girls and boys don't have a felt sense of safety in their bodies, it is water on a duck's back. And that is exactly what we are seeing. That's why it's not about trying harder, striving harder, praying more. It's about accepting that human foundation and opening ourselves up so that the grace can come in. But that felt sense of safety begins by telling young girls and young boys, your body is good, with no reference to God. We don't have to bring him in. Of course, we want to bring him in, and there's a place for that. But what we're seeing is, with this work I'm going to be doing, the Cycle Show, which I'm getting certified to teach, this is an initiative from the Guiding Star Project. So they've brought this over from Europe, where holistic health is a much bigger focus than it is here in the U.S. And so they've had this going in Europe for about 30 years. It's a huge in Germany. It's from Germany, but it's in several countries over there. And so they're teaching young girls and boys ages 9 to 12 the value of their fertile bodies and the age appropriate level. This is what's going on in your body. They also reference the equation of life. What's the equation of life? Egg plus sperm equals baby. We have done a huge disservice in the church, in churches, in the pro-life movement, of separating the sex talk from the fertility talk. We talk about the talk, but we don't bring in the fertility piece, right? Or we talk about fertility, but don't talk about sex with them. Don't talk about sex with them. That's
Right.
only for their parents, right? Now, let me be very clear. Obviously, this is a sacred, special, intimate encounter that has to be treated very reverently, but we actually do a huge disservice by completely separating these out. I grew up...
And that's not reverent.
No, it's not. Well, and I mean, I grew up in Nelson County. I grew up surrounded by farmland. Farms all around me, horses, cows, soybeans, whatever, right? So I think, when you grow up in that, there's a certain kind of natural, just like, this is how nature works, right? That's what happens. Oh, those are cows breeding. Those are horses breeding. Oh, ha, ha, look at that. Ha, 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 right? We laugh, we notice it. Oh, they're having a baby. Oh, look, she's pregnant. Oh, she's going to have a baby. Oh, cool. Oh, I once assisted my neighbor at a calf birth, right? So, I observed. I wasn't any help. But, but I think it's so important that we keep those two things together, obviously in an age-appropriate, holistic way. But this should not be a foreign concept that a man and a woman come together and in this intimate act, a baby is made, that the sperm is given to the woman in that way. And there's a certain way that we address that and explain that in a way that's very appropriate. And the emphasis of the cycle show is not on the sexual act, but we do teach about that very briefly for a period of the show because we want them to understand the why. The why. Here's the reason. Back to the natural order. The reason for our fertility is to be fruitful and multiply. God made us with fertility to subdue the earth. There is a why. We don't just, you can't just teach people a what. If kids, and this goes for all of us, we have to know why. Why does my fertility matter? If the equation of life isn't real or isn't relevant, then really my fertility doesn't matter. Why not have IVF? Why not use contraception? Why not do what I want?
Well, this is a connection between absolute truth and subjective experience. And this is, I think, what John Paul II was even getting at in the theology of the body, that it's not just all theology, it's the bodily experience that, and he called it phenomenological personalism, but he wasn't just appealing to Max Scheler, who coined that term, but he was going deeper with the theological side. So it's the fullness of this. It's not all based on subjective experience. Otherwise, you devolve into relativism.
Right.
It's based on what I feel and think in the moment. But it's the response to the Cartesian worldview. It's not I think, therefore I am. It's because otherwise that becomes I think, therefore I am whatever I think I am.
Right. Exactly.
It's the I am, therefore I think. I exist bodily, naturally.
Yes.
Therefore I can understand why and embrace the what because of the why. So it's like, I embrace my body. I trust my body because I trust that I am good and that there is someone who made me good.
Right.
And I'm grateful for that.
Right.
It's key.
And that even if our youth, I want to get this program, of course, into every school, into everyone. It's not for faith-based.
So you're saying it could be in public schools?
Oh, absolutely. Yes. Yeah. And in Europe, it's all over, right? It's not in religious. There's no reference to God or anything like that, which I think is awesome because it's very applicable to today's culture. But
what grades?
9 through 12-year-olds. So what is that? Fourth?
Is that third, fourth, and fifth?
It wouldn't be third. I think it's more like fourth, fifth, sixth. Okay. Yeah. Initially, their focus was 10 to 13-year-olds, but they found that with the culture shifts, especially in the U.S., where we're so exposed to so much so early, that they needed to make it more 9 to 12, and that as they got to 13, they kind of knew too much, and they weren't able to be receptive. It's not at all Montessori. I'm going to be really clear about that, but I say it's kind of a Montessori-esque approach because you have manipulatives, not of like you don't have like fake breasts or anything like that, right? But you have like different things that we use to illustrate it, right? To illustrate the woman's body and to help them understand what is going on in their body when they go through ovulation and menstruation and what their body's doing, that their body is preparing every month. A girl's body is preparing for a baby when she goes through her cycle. Every month, the messengers of spring, as we call them, they send this message and they wake up the ovaries, and the ovaries send the signals, right? And we start, the uterine lining gets lined and gets prepared. We call it this luxury hotel that is formed for the best guest of all. Like if you had Taylor Swift coming to a hotel you ran, would you have like chocolate dipped strawberries and champagne and the best pillows and the best bed and the AC just right? You would have everything set up just so, wouldn't you? And they send like their list ahead. Actually, my brother works in venues, and he was like, yeah, you get these lists. He hasn't worked with Taylor, but you get these lists when stars are coming, and they're like, this is what I want, and this is what I want the temperature, and this is what I want chilling, right? So we take this analogy and we tell the girls like, hey, your body doesn't know that you, of course, don't have a baby coming, right? But it thinks that it might. And so it gets everything all ready. And then it does this whole, like, prepares the uterine lining, and it does this amazing preparation. And this is awesome. And this is so cool. And so it's very, very positive. We're not weighing into the things that can go wrong. We're not talking about infertility issues or sexually transmitted diseases or assaults or anything like that. The goal here is really just to ground them in the goodness of their body and its natural order in just a very simple, age-appropriate, affirming way, right? And so we talk about that at the beginning of the show, that this is preparing for the equation of life, right? That it thinks, oh, okay, I might get this sperm that's gonna fertilize the egg, and then the sperm will go up this way, and all these kinds of things. We have like the little happy hormones that come out, right? We call the estrogen her girlfriends. So we want her to know that like your hormones are good. They're not a bad thing. They don't make you crazy. This isn't a problem, right? We need to be aware. We need to track this and watch this, right? And we might be more sensitive, right?
So how is it a show and not a class?
Well, we call it a show in the same way that you would say like a fashion show, right? And so this is very affirming language. In my work, I get the fun task of checking up on Planned Parenthood and looking at their website and reading their literature just to be on my toes. And when you look at their literature and how they talk about this, they use very cold technical terms: sex ed, sexual intercourse, the period, they're very like, they want to make it something very foreign, very fear-based. This isn't something you can understand. This isn't something you can trust. This is something you need to be really careful of, right? Kind of like all those words you can't pronounce on the back of food, right?
Yeah.
What is this? I don't even know. This is overwhelming. I can't understand this. I can't get this, right?
Keep it as foreign language as possible.
Keep it very foreign. So in the body literacy movement, which is what we're seeing take root now with a more healthy emphasis in the U.S., we have a lot of young women who would not call themselves traditional or conservative by any stretch, but a lot of women are actually turning away from the pill because they've seen the effects of that it's had on their bodies, right? Mm-hmm. And so what we're seeing in this body literacy movement that's coming up with like young 20-something-year-olds, where they want to know, like, what is my body doing? So the cycle show is for 9 to 12-year-olds, but that's like fashion show. Like, it's a positive thing, right? You would never see that kind of phrasing from Planned Parenthood. They would never say, they would call it sex education. They would be like very blunt. They're going to use more graphic words, They're not going to have any sense of awe or any sense of appreciation. The lens with all of their wording is very much, we have to fix this. Mm-hmm. And so the lens that we're looking at it from the cycle show is we have to understand and honor this, because I can only protect what I honor and respect. And that is a principle for every single one of us, right? My son loves cars, right? So he's talking about some fancy car and how like they took it out and they did this special ride with it. I don't know who wrote it. It was probably Joe Rogan. I don't know who it was. Some person, some influencer got to drive this car, and they cleaned the road before, right? And they made everything, make sure nothing was on the road before this ridiculous car got driven for 600 feet or something, And I thought, oh my gosh, this is so interesting, because at every aspect of our life, whether we're talking about a car, whether we're talking about our living room rug, whether we're talking about our clothes or our body, if I don't respect and honor it, I can't protect it. If I don't have a sense of respect and honor, I can't possibly protect it. And I can only protect what I respect and honor. So that's the mantra, that's the mission, the work, the focus of the Cycle Show, to teach these girls to respect and to honor their bodies. And then they naturally, they want to protect it. They want to protect it the same way the guys with the fancy car. Like, if you have a sense of awe and respect for this amazing car that's so cool and so rare, then you're going to be protective. You're going to clean the road before you drive it, right?
Yeah, but it's deeper because it's a human being.
Right. Absolutely, right.
Because they also use the analogy on the other side that it's you test drive the car before you buy it. You use women before you actually marry them. It's like,
that doesn't.
Right. See, it's the opposite mentality.
Not how it works.
But
yeah,
it's the deeper understanding, like using the analogy to help them see, like, if you're going to treat a thing with that kind of respect, imagine the depth and awe that you can have toward a human person.
Yeah.
Just like you are a human person. Like, because if you don't respect and honor yourself,
and that's the key.
How can you protect yourself?
That's the key. Yeah. We can't expect women to choose life for their unborn, for their preborn child, if they haven't chosen it for themselves.
Yeah.
If they have chosen a shadow of life, right? If they have, just had experiences and engaged in ways that have allowed themselves to be used, or they've been horribly used, they've been victims, they've been terribly hurt. And so my heart goes out to these women, particularly in these situations, because I don't think that there's any woman, really any woman, who would shout her abortion if she knew the gift. Right? If you knew the gift and who was saying to you, give me a drink, you would have asked and I would have given you living water. If she knew the gift of her body, it would not occur to her to take a pill to wash the baby down the toilet. It would not occur to her to get a surgery, right? Now, we're all human, and we know the Bible is full of stories, right, of sexual intimacy before marriage. Like, this is always going to be a part of our society. I hope that we have resource centers everywhere, all over the country. But I hope we have no more need for right to life organizations. We need to have resource centers everywhere because we are helping women who we're always going to need to help women and children. That's the scarlet letter, right? Like, we're always going to have these situations in society because we're human. We're going to fall, and that's going to happen. And so we need to have those safety nets, and those need to be a regular thing that we go to for resources and for support for holistic women's care. But right to life organizations, my job is to work myself out of a job. That's my goal. Like, we need to get to the point where we right to life organizations, we've done such a good job that the laws reflect the change because they reflect the cultural shift, right? We don't have any offices here that are for desegregation, do we? No. We've successfully achieved that, right? Now, of course, there's more work to do. And of course, we always want to. It's not the role that it was when my mother was growing up in Tennessee. She said, they had two different doors for everything, right? Two different water fountains.
And there would have been agencies and organizations completely dedicated to stopping that.
Yes, exactly.
That existed.
Yes, exactly.
I didn't even think of that.
Yeah. And they don't exist anymore. And that's not to say that there's no problems. I'm not saying that. I mean, there's always going to be problems in our society of racism and abortion and using people, right? Because of our fallen human nature, right? But our goal
about the urgency and the impact.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I think that the goal of the right to life organizations now is to really swim upstream. So the resource centers are reactive. They're the troops. They're on the ground. And the right to life organizations are kind of like the officers who are behind the desks, meeting the problem upstream, strategizing beforehand. Our work is no longer so reactive since Roe has shifted. Our work is now to be proactive. And that is where I see the Cycle Show coming in. It's this very proactive, let's meet this problem before it becomes a problem, right? So these resource centers are always, their role as a resource center is to be reactive. It is to minister to the mother in crisis.
And 30 or 40 years ago, they didn't really exist because they were still getting organized.
Well, they didn't exist also because when we had a girl who was pregnant, we brought her into our homes. Now, we also, in fairness, we did also have places where we would ship women off. And I don't think that was a good approach, right? So in fairness, we have to acknowledge that shaming that we did that was unhelpful from our perhaps Christian standards or Puritan roots of our country, whatever it was, that kind of caused that stigmatization. Now, obviously, I'm not advocating that we, engage in premarital sex, but we also have to understand that this is going to happen in society. This is going to happen with human nature. And the answer is to welcome that mother in with her child, to see this as a gift, right? To kind of be aware of our own
it's an
uncomfortableness.
Opportunity from God to help them understand themselves more deeply and, to take responsibility to overcome it. To see the child as
and
an opportunity.
Not to see them as a project, right? In the same way that, there's all kinds of there's all kinds of creative ways we all sin as humans, right? And we tend to take that particular sin and kind of, I don't know. I think we over focus on that. And C.S. Lewis says something to the effect of the sins of the flesh are the most natural. Because we are so limited in our knowledge and our, not that I'm making excuses, but I just think, we need to have a lot of compassion. We need to have a lot of compassion for these women and their children and for ourselves. And that compassion begins with ourselves. If I can extend compassion within myself for the sins I commit, then I can extend, then I have something to give, some compassion to give to others. And so I think it always begins, like you mentioned, that love of ourselves to take care of ourselves as the Lord has called us to. That is our first role. And then from there, we are able to minister and serve in the way that we need to.
And we know this is for not just women, but for young men as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, they have a cycle show. They don't call it the cycle show. They call it Agents on a Mission for young boys. And that's for 9 to 12-year-olds. And they really emphasize the power and the responsibility, how amazing it is and what your body can do. And they talk about, you have the power to generate life. This is amazing, but they really help the boys kind of come in and understand and see this as a good thing. This isn't a toy. This isn't something we're careless with, right? Right. If this were your special race car, would you crash it around? No, you wouldn't. Would you go anywhere with it? No, you wouldn't, right? So but always keeping that context, right? That the fertility and the equation of life go together, right? That because the equation of life, because sperm plus egg equals baby, always in all circumstances, sperm plus egg, baby, then that's our why for our fertility for both men and women, for both boys and girls. And we need to be aware of that, And so I guess to kind of circle back a little, I was explaining that at the beginning of the cycle show, we teach girls about their body preparing for that great guest. And then we say, but obviously that pertains to, when you're married and et cetera. And, your body's still going to go through that. So if you don't get the big special guest, the baby, then what do you have? We call it the small, can you edit out this part? I don't think I should have gone into this detail. Just want to make that note there.
Yeah. What
I feel
specific thing?
I feel like I'm explaining too much of the details that the audience is going to be like, what is she talking about? Because I was thinking we call it the cycle show because it's every month your body puts on the show and but I feel like I'm explaining it too detailed to make it understandable.
Oh, I don't know.
Does this throw? You can just edit this part out, right?
No, I think it's fine. But since we're at another kind of break point, I was gonna say we are at John's heart out.
Yeah.
Yeah. I have to get ready.
Oh, perfect. We can end.
Any kind of closing thoughts, I guess.
Yeah.
Well, I think my closing thought is that it is it's just that idea of what you're doing, Margaret, is courageous and incredible. Like just trying to be proactive and go upstream to reach people through education and formation. And some people can get in this side that it's this never-ending dance. You're always going to be educating and forming people, so why can't we just get them to stop aborting their children? It's like, well, if they don't value themselves, how are they going to value another person? And it's for boys, it's like our bodies are not toys or tools or trash. They're temples of the Holy Spirit, and they are treasures to cherish, right? And to use properly so that we can testify. It's like the New Testament is to testify, with our bodies. And it's a true gift that you're doing that. I thank you, from the bottom of my heart. And you also have to know, if we had more time, we could go on and on about more of the depth of what you've got going on with Right to Life of Louisville. And I mean, it sounds to me like we just need to schedule another episode here in another couple months once you, continue the depth.
Yeah, it'll be very exciting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, once you get Cycle Show up and running, I'd like to revisit and talk more about your experience with that, because that'd be awesome to hear about.
Yeah, I'm very excited. They said that their experience is that the girls have been very receptive. It's been in the U.S. about 7 years now, and so they've a lot in Iowa and Nebraska. It's out Minnesota. So the certification training I went to, so I go through a process before I'm actually certified. So I'm in training right now. So yeah, they go through this very intense training I just did in Minneapolis 2 weeks ago. And then I have to practice, and then I get to actually teach the shows, and I'm very excited. I think it will be awesome.
That's cool.
Yeah.
And a partner in the future would be great too, like just to see this continue grow. And so we look forward to hearing what it's going to look like.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. It's been an honor.
Yeah.
Thanks for coming on, Margaret. And thank all of you for sticking around. We'll see you on the next episode of Spirit and Spire. God bless you.